In this video, I'm going to react to a comparison between the United States and Canada. Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. This is the place where I react to music, media, sports, anime, anything related to popular culture. I'll watch it with an open mind and give you my 100% honest reaction to it. And if you could please hit that like button early, I'd really appreciate it. Now, this should be truly fascinating just because for me, for someone who lives in England, like when I picture the United States and Canada, I see two fairly similar countries in terms of the landmass, in terms of the size of the countries. You both use the dollar. Obviously, Canada used the Canadian dollar. Your accents are fairly similar, but there are obviously major differences. The population, for one, I believe the population of the United States is around 250 million, 300-ish million, whereas Canada's like 10% of that. I believe it's like 30 or 40 million. And I believe Canada has a large population, a large part of the country is just really cold, like a lot of wilderness. But other than that, I don't really know much about the two countries in terms of the differences between the two. So when I was recommended this video, I knew it was going to be a really interesting one because I'm sure, considering the views and the feedback, it's going to do a good job in really clearly demonstrating, similarities, differences, comparing and contrasting the two. So let's go. This is going to be me reacting to a comparison between the US and Canada. Let's do it.
Video is sponsored in part by CuriosityStream. Canada and the United States of America, the two biggest countries in North America.
We coexist together because we're all Canadian. We're part of Canada and we're bonding together against the common enemy, the United States. What a horrible country. I live there now. They're the most un-Canadian people you will ever meet in your life.
Nah, actually, both have a lot in common. Whoa, are we really gonna do this? Okay, let's do this. Both have very close cultural and economic ties. So actually, both are two of the biggest countries in the world. Canada is slightly bigger than the United States. Both
Really? I thought the US was bigger. Interesting.
Share the world's longest border between two countries. The border stretches 5,525 miles, or 8,891 kilometers. Yeah, while Canada has officially adopted the metric system as a whole, the United States is only one of 3 countries in the entire world that hasn't. That said, plenty of Canadians don't always use the metric system to measure stuff, and plenty of Americans do often use the metric system. Anyway, let's stick with more similarities first, okay? Both are two of the wealthiest, most developed countries in the world. Immigrants have flocked to both countries for economic opportunity for centuries, which is why major cities in both are some of the most ethnically diverse in the world. Both have mixed economies and have a progressive tax system on income. However, Canadians definitely pay higher taxes overall. Oh, lots of trading be going on between the two. The United States is Canada's largest trading partner, and Canada is consistently a top 3 trading partner for the United States. Both are in NATO and have historically fought as allies in wars. Both have lots of natural resources. Both have a wide variety of climates and rainfall patterns. Both are democratic.
Regarding the tax thing, I believe Canada has a similar healthcare service to we here in the UK. Like, let me know if that's incorrect. So does a portion of the taxes, the higher taxes that Canadians pay compared to the US, go towards that? Because I would imagine that's probably what the higher tax rate is for. but I'm sure he's going to touch on that later on in this video.
Specifically, the United States is a democratic republic, and Canada is a parliamentary democracy and constitutional monarchy. Both are growing at the same rate. Residents of both generally like their space. Indeed, everything is more spread out in both countries. Both have mostly the same holidays. Yeah, they both celebrate Thanksgiving, but of course not on the same day. Americans celebrate it on the fourth Thursday of November. Canadians celebrate it on the second Monday of October. This is partially because Americans associate the holiday more with the Pilgrims coming over, while Canadians associate it more with the Harvest Festival in general. Hey, you know what? Let's get into some history. But before we get into that, here's a word from our sponsor. Video. And for the next part of this video, my friend Mr. Betts from the channel Drawn of History told me that he'd just turned me into a cartoon if I jumped into the computer. Let's try this out, shall we? Okay then, let's do this. Well, the earliest humans in what would later become both countries had settled nearly all of North America by 12,000 years ago. The Norse came to North America, maybe as far south as modern-day United States, but certainly modern-day Canada, around 1,000 years ago. Throughout the 1500s, European explorers came searching for riches and to take over and convert indigenous peoples to their religion. The big three countries to explore, conquest, convert, and colonize were Spain, England, and France. The Dutch and Swedes also had small claims as well, and the Russians out west later on. Ultimately, future Canada and a big chunk of the future United States would be fought over by the British and French, while the Spanish held on to claims for another big chunk of the future United States up into future Canada. By the early 1700s, around a few thousand Spanish, 16,000 French, and 300,000 English settlers lived in modern-day United States and Canada. That alone should tell you the direction the future would go. But first, a few wars between France and Britain. The biggest one, the 7 Years' War, well, specifically the French and Indian War, led to Britain taking over all previously held French territory in mainland North America. Britain was feeling pretty good about that.
So I'm guessing this is probably what led to the War of Independence. Yeah, I think so.
Themselves until 13 of its colonies decided to all up and declare independence a few years after this. Today, Americans celebrate July 4th, 1776, as their country's birthday, as that was the day the Second Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence. After the American War of Independence, Britain lost most of its North American colonies, but it did hold on to future Canada. Many of the loyalists during that war, or folks who wanted to stay loyal to Britain, ended up fleeing the United States to future Canada. The United States was truly an experiment. It was the first government that went all in for the Enlightenment ideals of liberalism and republicanism, completely rejecting royalty and the aristocracy, while
I wonder why the people within the US who wanted to stay loyal to British rule didn't maybe just come to Britain, because I would imagine that would have been maybe the most convenient thing. Well, no, because the most convenient thing is traveling to somewhere that's not across an ocean. So then, yeah, maybe Canada was the best bet.
Calling for prioritizing the protection of natural rights. It was the first major group of colonies to successfully revolt against colonial rule and inspire the rest of the world. Meanwhile, in 1791, Britain established Upper Canada and Lower Canada. Lower Canada still had a predominantly French population. Also by that time, there were the colonies of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. In 1803, the United States bought Louisiana from France, doubling the size of the country.
They bought Louisiana. That's crazy. I mean, just like the thought of now buying an entire state. I mean, goodness knows how much that would cost. I mean, like, what would it cost to buy Louisiana today? Like, what's the GDP of Louisiana? It's got to be in the billions, right? So using some kind of business multiplier, let's say, what, 15x? So what, $15 billion Would that buy Louisiana today? Probably not. I've probably massively underestimated it.
Now let's jump ahead to the War of 1812. Most Canadians today know all about the War of 1812 and love to point out how this was the war when the British forces burnt down the White House. Most Americans barely know anything about the War of 1812, so hey, Americans, why don't you educate yourselves on it, okay? Mr. Betts has just released a video about it over on his new channel, Drawn of History. Go watch it right now and come back, or watch it later or something. I don't know. This is a collaboration, okay? Yes, we plan to release these videos at the same time. It's a conspiracy. Anyway, yeah, so the future Canadians and Americans battled it out in the War of 1812, but really, it was a draw. One thing for sure, after that war, things have been relatively peaceful between the two countries ever since. Well, there was the Oregon boundary dispute, as both the United Kingdom and the United States looked to continue expanding westward. Both had signed the Treaty of 1818 to settle boundary disputes and to jointly settle in Oregon country. However, as more and more American settlers came to Oregon by the 1840s, tensions got a little hot between the two. Fortunately, they resolved it with the Oregon Treaty, splitting up Oregon at the 49th parallel so that the United Kingdom got the northern half and the United States got the southern half. That 49th parallel today makes up much of the border between the United States and Canada. I guess later there was also a dispute between Alaska and the United Kingdom as well, once gold was discovered in the Yukon, but that was settled relatively easily. Back to the 1840s, the United States annexed the Republic of Texas, eventually leading to a war with Mexico, which the United States won and then got the northern half of Mexico due to winning that war. A few years later, it got its modern contiguous borders after the Gadsden Purchase. During the American Civil War, future Canada officially stayed neutral, although tens of thousands of men from future Canada enlisted to help the Union forces. Most from future Canada, after all, were against slavery by this time, and future Canada had long been a final destination for runaway slaves through the Underground Railroad.
Interesting. I wasn't aware of that. So Canada was a popular destination for the runaway slaves. Huh.
The British had gotten rid of slavery back in 1834. Anyway, a couple years after the Union was preserved and the 13th Amendment ended slavery in the United States, Canada actually became a country. Well, kind of. Mostly. They were a dominion, still technically part of the British Empire, but self-governing. Today, Canada Day is kind of like the 4th of July or Independence Day in the States. Canadians celebrate it on the anniversary of the Canadian Confederation being established.
This looks just like the House of Parliament. I mean, the resemblance is uncanny. And this looks a bit like a mini Big Ben.
Established on July 1st, 1867, in which the three colonies of Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick united. So here is how Canada looked at the time. But over the following decades, it expanded dramatically, and the United States tried to expand overseas. After getting Alaska, it aggressively found itself trying to gain a bunch of islands who mostly were not too happy being taken over. Kind of like all those Native Americans who had their lands stolen over the previous 2 centuries. Canadians generally did not treat indigenous peoples much better as they expanded. Both countries discriminated against people of color, and segregation was the norm into the first half of the 1900s. Most reforms in both countries during that time, such as women finally getting the right to vote, followed a similar pattern during that time. Canada and the United States were close allies during both the world wars. While the United Kingdom put Canada with full equal standing with it in 1931, most Americans have no idea that Canada didn't truly become a completely independent country until 1982.
What? Wow. So that means my parents are older than Canada. That is crazy. That's really crazy. But obviously, you know, long before then, it was Canada was a country, you know, in everything but in official name. But, you know, just to think that it only officially became a sovereign country, what's that, like 40 years ago? Crazy.
After it adopted its own constitution. After World War II, both countries went through very prosperous times and continue to follow similar paths with reforms. However, Canada went a bit further with its government programs and has been more left-leaning, and this trend continues to this day. Canada also seems to have gone in a more progressive direction earlier. For example, it legalized same-sex marriage 10 years before the United States. Today, many of the differences between Canada and the United States are linked to the fact that Canada stayed loyal to Britain for many years after the United States became a country, after breaking away from Great Britain. Most Americans love Canada. Less Canadians adore the United States, but still, they get along so freaking well. The United States has more people, a lot more people. In fact, it has 9 times as many people and has the 3rd largest population in the world. California has more people than Canada. Remember.
What? So one of the 50 states has more people than the entire nation of Canada. So does that must mean that land in large portions of Canada must be real cheap, right? Like real cheap, surely. Because I imagine most people are concentrated in, you know, really so the coastal cities perhaps, you know, where it's less cold maybe.
Canada is slightly bigger in size and is the 2nd largest country in the world by area, followed only by Russia. However, most of this area has few residents due to it being oh so very, very cold. 90% of Canadians actually live within 100 miles of the US border. And yeah, let's look at the climate more closely. Canada is perhaps obviously colder being further north, even if you include comparing it to Alaska. Most of Canada's climate zones are affected by very cold air from the Arctic region. There are exceptions. Along the southwestern coast of Canada, there is mostly an oceanic climate. Much of southern Canada has various types of continental or arid climates. However, the vast majority of Canada is subarctic, and much of it is also tundra. The furthest northern areas of Canada are even permanently under ice. The United States is obvious.
Permanently under ice. Just, I can't imagine the cold. Like over here in winter, the coldest it's got is like maybe minus 6, 7 Celsius. I was deciding whether to say Celsius or centigrade. But yeah, minus 6 or 7. So I imagine it must get much colder in large portions of Canada. And minus 6, that is bitterly cold, so I can't imagine how cold it must get over there.
Warmer overall, but basically has every climate zone imaginable. From the rainforests of Hawaii to the tundra of Alaska, from the humid subtropical climate of most of the South and part of the Midwest, to the deserts of the western portions of the country. Heck, you'll even see several different climate types within one state. The wettest parts of the country get as much as 275 inches of precipitation each year. On the other hand, Death Valley, which is often not only the driest but hottest place in the country, barely gets more than 2 inches of precipitation each year.
Man,
Canada.
That's in Vegas, right? Whew. That place must be dry. Real dry.
Has just as crazy of difference. The driest parts of the country up in Nunavut get just over 3 inches of rain each year, and Henderson Lake on Vancouver Island gets more than 287 inches each year. It gets more rainfall than any other place in North America. There are 50 states in the United States, and also a federal district, 5 self-governing territories, and several other random island possessions. Canada has 10 provinces and 3 territories. The life expectancy is higher in Canada. Related to this, Canada has universal health care. The United States does not. Yeah, politically, the United States is more conservative on most issues. The median age is higher in Canada. Canada has 2 official...
Can any Canadians or anyone who knows this answer this question, please? So earlier in the video, the narrator said that Canadians pay more tax on average than Americans. So over here in the UK, you pay income tax, but then you also pay national insurance. They both come out at the same time of your wages, and the national insurance is what mainly covers the NHS. Is it the same thing in Canada where your tax is kind of broken up into two sections, or is it just one tax and then the health service in Canada just takes a portion of that? Yeah, let me know. I'd be interested in that.
Languages, English and French. The majority of Quebec residents speak French as a first language. The United States has no official language, but the two most common languages are English and Spanish. The poverty rate is higher in the United States, although Canadians measure their poverty rate differently, so perhaps that is misleading. The United States also has worse debt as a percentage of GDP. However, the median household income is higher in the United States. Football, or American football, that is the most popular sport in the United States,
and
whereas ice hockey is the most popular sport in Canada. Major League Baseball and the National Basketball League both have 29 American teams and 1 Canadian team. Those Canadian teams in both leagues are based in Toronto, which indeed is a city that feels like it actually could be in the United States. The cost of living is generally higher in the United States. At the time of this recording, $1 Canadian was worth about 76 cents, meaning Americans visiting Canada get more of a better deal. Normally, there is lots of movement going back and forth between the countries, but less so, obviously, during the COVID-19 pandemic. Speaking of the pandemic, Canada has fared with it better than the United States. Canadians are generally less religious. For those who are religious, more identify as Roman Catholic, whereas in the United States, more identify as evangelical Protestant. A higher percentage of Canadians have college degrees, although the United States is known for having some of the best colleges in the world, and yeah, Canada spends more on education. Despite agriculture being much more of a big deal in the United States, more Americans live in urban areas. Sure, almost 80% of Canadians live in urban areas, but 80% of the entire country is uninhabited. Most of Canada is straight up wilderness, and it has more wilderness than any other country other than Russia.
If you wanted to buy a portion of land in that wilderness, could you theoretically just buy that land, build your house, and live there? Like, would there be anything stopping you from doing that? Because I imagine it must be so cheap, to buy like a couple of acres of that wilderness. Like how much would it be to buy a couple of acres, deep in the Canadian wilderness? I'd love to know, because I imagine probably a few people do that, because the cost of living, once you've bought the land and you've built your house, as long as you can find a way to get clean water and electricity, you're sorted, aren't you?
Just about 18% of the United States is wilderness. Major industries in Canada include mining, healthcare, manufacturing, and transportation. Major industries in the United States also include healthcare and manufacturing, but additionally, technology and retail. According to the World Happiness Report, Canadians are happier than Americans. Canada is known for Tim Hortons. The United States is known for Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks. Well, dang, while we're at it, the United States is known for so many freaking brands. 3 of the 5 biggest companies in the world, Walmart, Amazon, and Apple, are all based there. Probably the most well-recognized symbol of the United States is the bald eagle. The most well-recognized symbol of Canada, the maple leaf. It's even on the flag. The American flag has 13 stripes that represent the original 13 colonies and 50 stars that represent the 50 states of the Union. The United States has a much bigger military. In fact, it easily has the largest military in the world. No other country even comes close. Marijuana is completely legal in Canada, but in some...
What? Completely? So literally completely. So you can just sit out in the street and, really? What? I had no idea. I thought it might have been decriminalized, but completely legal nationwide? Wow.
Some American states, it's still illegal. Canada has less violent crime. The United States has a higher percentage of its own citizens in prison than any other country in the world. That said, the United States is generally a more free place. One example of this is censorship. Perhaps due to Americans placing a high value on freedom of speech, you just hear and see more provocative and controversial stuff there. How about Canadian content, eh? The Canadian government actually requires that radio and TV broadcasters, including cable and satellite channels, have to broadcast at least a certain percentage of content that was at least partially created or presented by Canadian residents. Fortunately for Canada, lots of great music comes out of the country considering how much fewer folks live there. But yeah, American culture is more influential on the world. Throughout history, as the United States dominated mass media, it also spread its culture around the world through music, movies, TV shows, video games, and social media. There are two major reasons for this. One, a spirit of innovation throughout American history, and two, just having a huge domestic market. With the majority of Americans speaking English, they have also had access to a worldwide market of more than 2 billion English speakers. The United States is more nationalistic. If you tell a Canadian about the Pledge of Allegiance, many of them would be a bit confused, to say the least. Canada stopped making pennies. The United States still does, for some reason.
I think we still make pennies as well, but with the way things are going, especially over the last year and a half, where like the UK, in at least what I see, it's quickly moving to a cashless society. You know, contactless, they keep raising the limit as to how much you can spend via contactless. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if we stop making pennies too. I just think maybe that's where a lot of countries are going.
Canadians generally do know a lot more about the United States than Americans know about Canada. Americans party harder. I have no scientific evidence to back this up, but it's probably true. Okay, let's try to wrap this up. Overall, most of the differences between the two are subtle, like Canadians apparently call these pencil crowns, but Americans call them colored pencils.
We call them
Canadians
colored
call
pencils.
these washrooms, and Americans call them bathrooms or restrooms.
Yeah, we call those toilets.
But honestly, folks like J.J. McCullough argue those differences are overrated. Because both countries are so dang big, and because there are so many regional differences, it's been really difficult making this video, since many of these generalizations are misleading. Undoubtedly, the United States remains a superpower in the world, and Canada is often in its shadow. However, both continue to thrive and really do depend on each other. And yeah, they really are two of my favorite countries. I mean, no surprise, right?
That was fun. That was a fun watch. I mean, yeah, just as I suspected, it's two very similar countries, both in terms of, size, culture, way of life, beliefs, things like that. Very similar countries, but like he mentioned, like the creator of the video mentioned, the differences are very, very subtle. You need to spend a decent amount of time in both countries to really get a good feel for the differences there. I've never been to Canada. Like, I do plan on going to Canada next year. Like, I'm thinking of either doing, when I visit the States next year, I'm either thinking of spending a couple of weeks in Canada or maybe just going there separately, because I've never been and there's just so many things I've heard about it. I've heard it's a really cool place to be. So yeah, I'm deciding whether to go. Let me know what like, if you were to spend 2 weeks in Canada, how best would you organize that? Where would you go? Like, what portion of time would you spend in the different areas? Just to, I know it's impossible for me to get a real feel of the country in 2 weeks, but with that limited amount of time, what would you do? How would you spend it? Let me know. I'd love to read your comments. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, turn on bell notifications, and keep throwing the recommendations my way. I know I say it all the time, but they genuinely help me out, because if I know you enjoyed watching something, I'll definitely enjoy reacting to it. So like, subscribe, turn on bell notifications, keep throwing the recommendations, and I'll catch you in the next one.